Well, Tacoma Ghost Story by Mick. I'm a city boy from a city where the most significant wildlife you would find are probably squirrels. When I left the army and moved to Tacoma in an apartment near the community college, I was amazed at how many deer I saw weaving around the front yards and along the green belts around the town. One night, in the middle of summer, around 2 a.m., because that's where the bars close, I was walking home, slightly drunk but aware of my surroundings. That was a safe part of town back then, but there was no reason to take any chances. I saw 3 coyotes rush onto the sidewalk in front of me, and then they all stopped. All 3 of them just stared at me for a moment, and then looked behind them into the narrow tree line, acting kind of nervous. I've never seen more than 1 coyote at a time before, and certainly not in the suburbs. Being the big, arrogant drunk I am, I simply clapped my hands loudly a few times and quickly said, "Go on, get out of here." They did not run back into the tree line away from me. They trotted towards me initially, then crossed the street to avoid me, then sprinted past me as fast as they could. So now, I'm kind of wondering, what is with the narrow stretch of trees? What scared the coyotes away so quickly that they just ran past me in the street? I was a bit more curious than spooked. So when I got near the spot that they ran away from, I turned on my phone flashlight and started poking around. That's when I saw, or at least I thought I saw, a kid wearing a parka and boots running around, waving a stick around in each hand. In the middle of the night, in the middle of summer, all alone. It was like a kid around preschool age just frolicking around carefree. The kid very briefly glanced at me and then effortlessly disappeared into some blackberry bushes, which is no easy feat for a grown man with a machete, let alone a kid. I've never felt so weird in my life. I know I was slightly drunk and no one will believe me, but I called the police non-emergency number anyway. I reported that 3 coyotes were acting weird to let animal control know, and then I lost my nerve before mentioning the ghostly child running around. My eyes had barely left the place from where that demon kid thing had disappeared from, but I watched him disappear right in front of my eyes. I don't really know how to explain this experience other than it had to have been some sort of ghost. I am no longer a skeptic. By Anonymous. I would like to start by saying that while I am interested in the paranormal, I tend to be skeptical and prefer to think things out rationally before dismissing every little thing as a ghost or the like. This experience, however, has no logical explanation I can think of. I am new here, and as well, I apologize in advance if I'm not doing this correctly. So, let's get into this. I was 17 and it was mid-October, nearing Halloween. My family had gone to a small, rural town to meet up with some good friends. We were going to get dinner and catch up for old time's sake, as my siblings and I had grown up with the children of the other families. After dinner, the parents stayed at the bar drinking, and those of us who were not of legal drinking age were starting to get a little bored. That is when one of my friends brought up the local cemetery. Apparently there is a cemetery in this town that is said to be haunted. I'm pretty positive that some ghost hunter paranormal type show did an episode about it or something, but the legends are said to have been around since before that. The story goes that a group of teenage boys were wandering into the graveyard one Halloween night with the intention of causing trouble and maybe stirring up some spooky ghost action in celebration of Halloween. After messing around for a while with no unexplained phenomena, they decided to sit in on top of the mausoleum, which is basically just a big tomb built up around a coffin instead of burying it in the ground. They were about to call it quits and head home when suddenly, unseen hands seemed to push one of the boys off the top of the tomb and into the ground. All the boys were obviously scared and hightailed it out of there, all of them feeling an eerie, ominous energy following them around for weeks after the incident. There have also been numerous reports of orbs, headstones inexplicably moving or disappearing altogether, ghostly apparitions, inscriptions being changed, flashes of light, strange noises, the whole works. I, of course, was more than excited to check it out. We arrived at the cemetery well after dark, and one of my girlfriends, we will call her Emma, and I were the only 2 brave ones enough to go in. We hopped right out of the car, careful to be as inconspicuous as we could since we did not want the police showing up and ruining our ghost hunting experience. We headed toward the entrance. It was chilly and a bit windy, as autumn in Wisconsin tends to be. We gripped each other's hands and started down the gravel path. As soon as we passed the fence that surrounded the plot of land, everything seemed to get very still and very quiet. We could not even hear the wind anymore, which was strange as it had been breezy as we got out of the car. It was so silent that even whispering and our steps in the gravel seemed, pun absolutely not intended, loud enough to wake the dead. Though there were no lights in or near the cemetery, there was enough moonlight filtering through the clouds to allow us to see well. We soon realized we had no idea where the fabled haunted mausoleum was, but kept walking anyway. We made a random left turn, and lo and behold, there it was, about 30 yards or so in front of us. Surprisingly, we had great luck, right? I don't think so. As we approached, I began to feel almost an electric sort of energy in my fingers and hands, but I wrote this off as just nerves or something due to breaking the law. We reached the tomb, and this thing is absolutely huge. It was easily twice my height, at the very least, and made of weathered gray stone with moss and lichen growing sparsely on it. We stare at it for a moment, and Emma whispers, "You should touch it." Being the big bad ghost hunter I am, I oblige. There is really nothing remarkable about the cool roughness of the stone, so I decide to take it a step further and hop up to sit up on the lip of the curved top of the thing. Again, nothing happens, so I jokingly whisper shout, "If there's anyone here, any spirits or anything, come on out." After listening in silence for a second or two, I think, F it, and make my way to the very top where the kid is rumored to have been pushed off by ghostly hands. I have Emma snap a photo or two of me before climbing back down. Slightly disappointed by the lack of spooky encounters, we agree to head out and are about to do just that, when we see a pair of headlights slowly creeping down the road that borders one side of the graveyard. We immediately assume someone noticed us and called the cops, so we crouch down behind some bushes with the mausoleum directly to our left. Both of us are completely silent except for our breathing as we watch the vehicle slowly make its way down the street. I am watching its tail lights turn the corner when I hear a low, creepy, menacing laugh coming from right behind me. It sounded so strange, like it was a few feet away but also right in my ear at the same time. I'm freaked out, and I'm about to chalk it up to adrenaline-induced hallucination, when Emma, who is standing to my left, whispers, "Hey, did you hear that?" My blood ran cold, as I slowly nod a silent, "Yes, I did." I cautiously turn my head to one direction, and try to see if I can hear it. I kid you not. I didn't hear anything, but what I did see was a dark figure stand up from behind one of the headstones not 10 feet away from us. I scream bloody murder, and somehow end up on the ground as the next thing I know Emma is pulling at my arm shouting, "We have to run! We need to get out of here, come on!" I let her pull me to my feet and lead me blindly by the hand. We are full out sprinting, tripping over gravestones and plants and who knows what else in the dark. We cannot even find the exit in our panic. We finally reach a gap in the fence and I can feel the tears streaming down my face as I run for my life down the middle of the road, not even paying attention to the oncoming headlights until I nearly run into them. Luckily, it was the car containing the rest of our friends, and we rip the door open and throw ourselves inside screaming, "Go, go, please just drive," before we even bothered to sit in an actual seat or shut the door. I cannot for the life of me remember who was driving, but I think our panic and terror shook them enough that they did exactly what we asked of them and sped away back to the bar. They kept asking us what happened and if we were okay, but we would not calm down enough to answer them until we were back inside the bar and sat down. Still shaking and out of breath, we recounted our story to all of them, drunk parents included. I think a lot of them were skeptical, and honestly, I would have been too if I had not experienced it myself. In the weeks that followed, I felt the same eerie energy the boys in the legend describe hanging over my head. Personally, I attribute it more to paranoia after being scared out of my mind by something I could not actually see, but it made me feel uneasy nonetheless. It has been a few years since this happened, and I still cannot think of a single logical explanation for what actually happened that night. While I have no idea how credible anyone else's reported experiences on the show are, I know we were without a doubt the only people in that graveyard, or even on the streets for that matter, and we would have heard someone trying to sneak up on us. The sound of that laugh was so unnatural. I cannot get it out of my head. Even now, I have never been more scared than I was that night, and I now know what people mean when they talk about not being able to fully believe in the paranormal until you have experienced it firsthand. Anyway, I just thought I would share this experience with you. I hope you enjoyed it. I Tried to Ghost Hunt by Anonymous. In 2009, I was interested in the paranormal, since I had many paranormal experiences growing up. I found a website that held ghost tours at the old Southwestern General Hospital. I was excited and ready to go on a ghost hunt. The group that held the ghost tour was named Ghost, or Ghost Hunters of South Texas. The group was professional, and they used many of the items that paranormal researchers used at the time. Before the tour, they showed us proof that they have captured in previous investigations while investigating the property. EVPs included a little boy saying, "Play with me, please," and a woman with a southern accent responding to questions. The woman is said to be in an old-time dress, and sometimes old-time nurse attire. After the tour, the group said they were having openings for new members, and the new members would be tested and would be considered in maybe being part of the new team. I was quick to join and try out. I made the team. The team would have private group ghost hunts, so we would have the building to ourselves. The third floor was used as a hospice type of area. The building has 4 floors. The first, second, and fourth floor were left abandoned, and they looked like a scene out of a horror movie. Hospital beds lay in rooms dusty and unused. Many had dates from 1995 and before. I even found a death log that had many names and dates. The most active areas were the 4th and 2nd floor. The 4th floor had a baby nursery, and many rooms that were once used for families that would be welcoming new babies. One EVP that was caught in that area was one of crying babies. At the time the EVP was caught, there were no babies in the building, and it was after midnight sometime when it was caught. Also on the 4th floor, there was a long hallway with empty patient rooms. In that hallway, shadows were always seen running or moving. The 2nd floor was an old area. Also, many shadow figures were seen in this area. When doing research on the deaths in the building, I came up with what looked like to be a nurse who was crushed to death when a malfunction with the elevator happened years ago. During the time I was a part of this group, we investigated this building tons of times. I might even care to say maybe over 100. I also led ghost tours in the building with other members. I witnessed shadows, disembodied voices, screams, and one time heard a female humming a song only to find the room empty and dark. I've seen videos of doors opening on their own with no wind or people in the building. Also, the 3rd floor had employees that would see things and hear things very often. Patients also complained of a kid running in their room or a man standing over their bed just looking at them, only to disappear. Over the years, I gained experience and loved what I did. As a group, we investigated many places such as schools, homes, and cemeteries in El Paso. We also got to investigate the old Esarco smelter before it was demolished several years later. I got to ghost hunt with people from Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International. I met many celebrities, and the group had them take their own personal ghost tours. It was fun, and I grew a thick skin for fearing anything that goes bump in the dark. One of my favorite places to investigate was Southwestern General Hospital. I never believed in being followed home. One night after investigating, I was at my apartment eating on my couch and watching TV. I had my hallway light on near the front door that was visible from where I was sitting. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow of a person on the wall near the door. I turned and saw the shadow in full form. It was about 6 foot tall and completely black. Then, Not even a second later, the shadow moved as if it was running down my hallway to my bedroom. I froze in horror, thinking somebody was in my apartment. I got up and walked to my bedroom. Nobody was there. I searched the whole house up and down, and then I thought to myself, maybe I'm just going crazy. I soon went to bed a few minutes later. It was probably about 3:20 a.m. when I felt my bed shaking. I woke up to my sheets being pulled off me very slowly and deliberately. I tried to move, but I just could not. My sheets slid very slowly off me towards the floor. I could not move, and I started to hear growling in my right ear. From the corner of my eye, I could see something moving near my head on the right of me. It was on my pillow. I could only see from the peripheral vision that it had hair. It was hairy and brown. If I could compare it to something, I would say Chewbacca from Star Wars type hair. It was moving, very slowly, but obviously very deliberately. It was growling as well. My eyes started to water up with tears. I tried to move my arm, but I just couldn't. I could only move my fingers. The blanket was still being pulled off me little by little until it hit the floor and I was no longer covered by my sheet. I felt the hairy thing moving right next to me, and the growling grew louder. Then suddenly, I was able to sit up and I turned and looked to see what was there next to me. The hairy thing was gone, but I could see the imprint of where it had sat right next to me just a moment ago. It was the size of a full-grown cat. Then I looked around the room to gather my sanity. I don't own a cat. My sheet was on the floor, and my eyes were still watery. I asked myself, maybe it was just sleep paralysis. I found it hard to sleep that night, since I lived alone in that apartment. The next day I had a girl over to my apartment. I was seeing her from school. I was playing PlayStation and she asked if she could take a nap in my bed. I said of course. She went to my bed and fell asleep. Around 20 minutes later, she suddenly came back to my living room in tears. She said, I have to leave now. I asked her what was happening and what was wrong. What she said shocked me. She said that something shook the bed and woke her up. She could not move, and then something was growling and started getting close to her ear. Then the bed went down as if somebody lied down next to her. She tried to scream for me and could not. Then she felt as if somebody was breathing on her neck as the growling grew louder. She said it lasted about 2 minutes, and then she was finally able to move. Once she was able to move, she ran to me in the living room. After she explained this, I grabbed her stuff and helped her leave. I did not tell her what happened to me the night before, but I had that same exact experience, and what happened to her was enough proof that something was not right. I could not explain what was happening. First thing that came to mind that something probably followed me home from the hospital. After a few days, all the activity suddenly stopped. Only when I would go in on investigations, I would see shadows in my apartment, and then they would just go away. I loved what I did, and the only time I feared the paranormal was this moment. I no longer ghost hunt, and the group no longer gets together. Southwest General Hospital was purchased and is now remodeled and is in use. I can only imagine what the employees of the LTAC go through by being in that building. Every now and then I drive down Cotton and pass the building. I miss the days of being part of Ghost El Paso. If you are ever in El Paso after stopping by at Chico's Tacos, be sure to pass by the old building by the star on the mountain formerly known as Southwest General Hospital. Hey Swamp Dweller, my name is Michael B., and I live in the oldest village in Saskatchewan, before it was Saskatchewan, or before Canada was even a country. We live in the largest delta in Canada, and the second largest in the world. Something that old is obviously going to be haunted, and there's going to be lots of stories about creatures of the night. There are stories of witches, skinwalkers, wetigos, which are basically wendigos. There's been sightings of demons, a man in a trench coat with goat legs, and even the devil himself. For now, I want to talk about a story of a haunted house I lived in. It was used for wake ceremonies before we had halls to host them, and right behind the house was the graveyard. I'll start from the first happening. First, let me tell you about the layout of the front and back doors. Let's say you're standing on the street. You have the front door facing the street, obviously. and stairs leading up to it, with the big bay window next to the front door. The back door is on the side of the house facing the street as well, so you can see in both doors from the street. One day, I was home alone doing chores, and when it was time to do my laundry, I had to go downstairs into the basement to do it. The basement was scary by itself, even if it wasn't haunted because of how old it looked. Whenever I did my laundry, I would always feel like I was being chased up the stairs by something. It honestly felt like there was a face right at the back of my neck the entire time, screaming at me, breathing down my neck. On this day, my brother Jay was coming over to visit since I was home alone. I happened to be coming up from the basement, which pops up right at the back door. So, he saw me walking past the door into the living room. When he saw me walk past the storm door, he said he saw someone walking right behind me. When he gets into the house, he asks me who else is here, and I tell him no one. I've been home alone since this morning. He then tells me that he saw someone right behind me, following me from the basement. It gets worse throughout the months, but I'm oblivious to what's happening because I didn't believe in this stuff at the time. The second happening, I get home from drinking at about 4 a.m. I head into my room to sleep, and as I'm about to fall asleep, I swear I hear what sounds like hooves walking on my ceiling, or maybe even in the attic. It sounded bipedal for sure, heavy, and it stopped right above me. The last thing that happened before I refused to stay in that house was the worst thing. I was coming home after staying at my cousin's house for a couple of days and seeing that my house was well lit. I assumed someone was home, so I started jogging because it was dark and mosquitoes like to bite. Remember when I told you there was a big bay window by the front door? Well, the curtains were open, and as I ran up the stairs, I looked inside and saw a black mass sitting on my couch looking out to me. I didn't think anything of it. I thought someone was home. There was a split second from when I see that thing on the couch to when I walked in the house. I walk in and there was no one there whatsoever. I was absolutely creeped out. I started calling out to my mom and walked around the entire house. Nothing. No one was home. I stood in my living room for a second, and that's when it hit me. Who the hell was on my couch? That's when I hear someone walking up the stairs and dread washed over me. I got the hell out of that house and moved out a month later due to unrelated things. These events happened during my second year at university. It was September. The school year was about to start, and I had moved into a high-rise apartment with 3 other girls: Brittany, Morgan, and Natalie. It didn't take long for some sketchy things to start happening. After 2 weeks of living in the apartment, Morgan asked me if I was rolling a ball around at night. I told her it wasn't me, and that she must have been hearing things. We dropped the subject, but that night I started hearing knocking in the vent above my bed. The vent hung below the ceiling, and the opening was perfectly in line where my head would be when I was sleeping. The knocking sound was annoying, and it would only happen at odd hours of the night. I always thought it was probably the sound from the air conditioning turning on, but the knocking sounded strange, almost human and rhythmic, like someone trying to get my attention. Still, I didn't think too much of it and didn't think anything was going on. It was just an odd noise that I could live with, so I told myself. About a week later, I woke up to hear what sounded like a marble rolling on the tile floor above me. It was a distinct sound, and I finally believed Morgan. But I knew there had to be a logical explanation. There were college boys living in the apartment above us, and I figured they were probably messing around. By November, Natalie, Morgan, and I had been hearing the noises every night, but Brittany claimed she had never heard them. One day, we were making small talk with the building manager, and I mentioned the noises. She said the people who lived in our apartment before heard rolling and knocking sounds as well. She claimed she had electricians come in to fix noises, but I guess it never worked. At this point, we all thought it was funny. We didn't believe in ghosts. Well, I didn't until that night. As we were walking into our apartment, my back was to the living room, and Morgan and Natalie were facing me, so they had a full view of the living room. I jokingly said to them, "Well, it looks like the apartment is haunted." Natalie looked at me, laughed, and said, "Ghosts aren't real." As soon as the last word came out of her mouth, I heard the most gut-wrenching, deafening noise I had ever heard up until that point. Crashing, shattering, and scratching noises erupted from behind me. My heart raced and I saw true terror on Natalie and Morgan's face. Their high-pitched screams pierced my ears, and on instinct, I ran. I didn't even look back one time. I just screamed and ran straight out of the apartment with Natalie and Morgan close behind. We didn't stop until we were one floor away from the lobby, and at that point, we were in tears. It may have been an overreaction, but I thought a maniac had broken into our apartment. Natalie explained that after she had spoken, everything in our apartment crashed onto the floor. She didn't see anyone. All she saw was all of our stuff just flying off. The shelves, the counters. After a while, we calmed down and went back upstairs. Inside of our apartment, all of our pictures, appliances, lights, and decorations were on the ground. Our light fixtures were unscrewed and were hanging by the wires. Some of the cabinet drawers had been left open, and our Christmas lights were twisted around the sofa. We really did try to rationalize what had happened, but we just could not figure it out. We lived in Canada, so there was no earthquake, tremor, or tornado. Brittany had been in the apartment the entire time. When we knocked on the door, she answered and said she had never heard anything happen. I found that very hard to believe. Throughout the year, odd occurrences kept happening. The noises continued. Our lights would turn on and off. Doors would open and close, and sometimes at night we would hear someone mumbling in the hallway. My tolerance level for annoying things got low as exam season approached, so I stopped caring about what was happening. The next year, Natalie, Morgan, and I moved into a different apartment within the same building. We didn't experience anything weird after moving out. I can't help but think that Brittany was to blame for some of this. It's hard to explain, but she was a dark person. I wouldn't put it past her to have messed with us for fun. To this day, I still can't decide if it was something paranormal, Brittany messing with us, or just an odd coincidence. Regardless, it was one of the weirdest and scariest experiences of my life. I just hope I never live in a haunted apartment or haunted house ever again. My Terrifying Demon Encounter by Ben K. I am 22 years old now, but when this happened, I was 17 years old. I had an extremely terrifying experience that has stayed with me my entire life. I was always getting in trouble when I was a teenager. I was kicked out of 2 high schools, I ran away multiple times, and made life hard for my parents and myself. When this went down, it was the summer, and I was in that I'll do whatever I want mode. One day, my parents called and told me that I had to come home. I didn't want to, so I said, "No way, I want to hang out with my friends." My parents responded, "Well, you can either come home or you can find someplace else to live." So, I did. I asked my friend if I could get a job and live with her in their apartment for a while. She wanted some help with the rent anyway, so she said it was okay. Her apartment, if you could call it that, was the upstairs of a 150-year-old home split into 4 apartments. The building is around 150 years old and has a sign out front from the original owners. It has their names and all that cool stuff on it. I only noticed the sign after I left, though. The apartment was spread out, and at the very back of it was the smallest of 3 bedrooms. I made that my room because it was the most private and out of the way. After a while, it turned into the smoke room. The first couple of weeks were enjoyable staying there, and we threw a couple of parties. But after a couple of weeks of staying there, I remember walking home from work one night, and my friend would be gone. I would go in the front door, walk up the wooden stairs to our door, and when I got to the door, the hair always stood up on the back of my neck because I felt like something on the stairs was watching me and didn't want me to be there. Of course, I had to go into my apartment though, regardless of that feeling. I had nowhere else to go, and nothing had happened to me to make me necessarily scared at this point. So, I would go in, get food, and just sit on the couch with my back to the wall until my roommate got home. One night, I mentioned how I was getting creeped out in the apartment, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure it's haunted." She told me that she would often wake up watching TV in the middle of the night, and her miniature dog would just jump off the couch and run into my room. She said the room would be pitch dark, but he would just stand there barking at the ceiling. However, she never saw anything. That was pretty creepy to hear, considering it was my room, so I slept on the couch that night. I fell asleep with her little dog curled up next to me. In the morning, an extremely frightening thing happened to me. I remember waking up to what I thought was a man or something with a man's voice laughing very loudly and tauntingly in my ear. I was immediately struck with terror and confusion. I looked into my roommate's bedroom and saw her sleeping on her bed while this was going on. I tried yelling for her but was frozen, and no words came out. I had an overwhelming feeling like all of my energy was just being sucked out of me. On top of what was already happening, the entire house started shaking for a minute. I remember thinking, it's lights out. I know it's the morning, but I can't believe this is happening right now. I think that this attack only lasted for about 2 minutes maximum, and then whatever it was seemed to be sucked right out of the window. It's not that I saw it being sucked out of the window, but I just felt it leave that way. My voice returned after another minute, and I called for my roommate. When she woke up, she said that she had not heard or felt anything. I couldn't believe what had just happened, and I was way too petrified to continue living there. I told a couple of people about my experience, and I was so disturbed that I researched some of the home's history at the library. I honestly did not encounter anything too crazy, but I do believe that whatever attacked me may be a spirit that was unrestful. Or maybe it's some sort of demonic attack. The idea scares me to death, but I'm pretty sure at this point it was something demonic. The Grim Reaper by Anonymous. This happened somewhere around 7 or 8 years ago. I can't recall the exact amount of time that has passed. I was working on this nursing home when I was still in Baltimore, Maryland. I was a new nurse stationed at this skilled unit they called the vent unit. Now, the patients or residents that stay here look like they are in critical condition with their ventilators attached to their trachea and peg tubes attached to their feeding pumps. Still, they are stable enough to be placed on our unit. Our unit is like a crossroads. I don't know how to describe it, but I'll try. The nurse's station is like the middle, and shaped like a circular area where you can see the north, south, east, and west hallways leading to the other units. The north hallway has a dead end that leads to a wall at the far end and nowhere else to go. That side of the hallway always creeps me out, especially during the night shift, and unfortunately, I always work the night shift. One night, it was past midnight already, and the lights were dimmed, but the north hallway was notably darker than the rest. Probably because it was a dead end. I was doing my chart checks when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a very tall shadow that just glided toward a resident's room. I was facing the east wing at the time because I didn't want to be facing the dark hallway, and still, it didn't spare me from witnessing something unusual. I did my best. I shrugged it off as my imagination, but I could feel something different. Anyway, since I do most of my rounds in a quarter-hour interval, I went to the north hallway and checked on the patients. I didn't see anything out of the normal, no tall shadows, nothing unusual. So I went to do my duties and just went on with my night. Fast forward the next day, as I came in from my shift that night and I was getting the report, I was surprised that the endorsing nurse told me that the patient in that room had passed away that morning. I immediately recalled the tall shadowy figure I saw out of the corner of my eye that went through that side of the hallway into the rooms at the far end. I wasn't particularly sure which room, but I knew it was near the resident who had passed away. Again, I did my best to pass it off as a coincidence. A few months later, something happened that scared the absolute crap out of me while working there. I was passing out meds sometime past midnight for some scheduled meds on my patients. I was again in the north hallway, and it was pretty dim. Everything was quiet except for some occasional dings and alarms of some vents, but nothing unusual. It was dark as I entered this room since the lights were off, but dim lights were in the hallway behind me. Now, the rooms have these expansive windows that are usually covered at night by curtains or blinds, but in this particular room it was wide open. I can't see what's outside since it's pitch black, but the window serves as a mirror since I can see my reflection in the reflection of the hallway behind me when I enter the room. This gives me the creeps until today, and I remember when I entered the room like it just happened to me. I felt like something was behind me. You know that feeling you get when you are being watched, and you feel the hairs on the back of your neck standing up with that prickly sensation all over your body as your heart starts to rise and pound faster? That's exactly what I felt. And what made it worse is when I was trying to search for the room's light switch. I roamed my eyes all over the room while feeling my hand on the wall for the switch, when my eyes landed on the reflection of the window where I saw a tall, shadowy figure standing just behind me. My heart skipped a beat, and as soon as I felt the switch, I turned it on, and the figure was gone from the reflection on the window. I was so freaked out that I never said a word that shift, and just did the rest of my work to occupy my mind. Coworkers ask me to this day why I was so abrupt to leave that day, and honestly, I don't know how to explain it. It's one of those unforgettable moments that I will forever live with. A Dark Veil by Blossoms. My friend's uncle passed away a few weeks ago. I returned to Brazil for his funeral since he was one of the helpers who introduced me to my grandmother's tribe. Not a person from the tribe per se, but something like a tour guide. If it were not for him, I would never have met the same tribe my grandmother was in. For people who do not understand, my grandmother is from a native tribe in Brazil called Taparapa. They are very mysterious and not too open-minded, which means they rarely communicate with outsiders. My friend's uncle was a middle person who allowed me to contact those people. I do not think I became a friend to the tribe, but some elders still remembered my grandmother. During the funeral of my friend's uncle, in the air of sadness, I looked into the casket to say my final goodbye. I could not look into his face directly because I was afraid I would burst out crying. As I looked up and reached his face, I thought I saw a black veil over it. I wondered if anybody else would hide the dead man's face with a black veil. I didn't think that was normal. When I looked again from the corner of my eye, I saw no veil. I whispered to my sister, "Did you see the veil on his face?" My sister said no, and then shushed me. Honestly, I know I saw something strange. It was probably just maybe something tragic, but I did hear on my way out somebody whispering about a black veil lingering over the body. Were we seeing maybe a Grim Reaper? Were we seeing some sort of demon? Or maybe was this just lingering energy from my friend's uncle? A Place We Were Not Supposed to Find by Anonymous. This happened in 2013 or 2014, my junior year of high school. I was visiting my girlfriend and her family in Washington, in the Centralia area. We drove up to the BLM roads to do some grilling and shooting. It was spring break, so it was a very gray and very rainy time. While the adults were setting up the grills, my girlfriend and I got into an ATV and went back on the road we came in to do some exploring. We went around a sharp curve in the road, and the wind and rain suddenly stopped. The sky went from gray to gold, and there was a clearing that went from the side of the road to the woods roughly 200 feet away. The light in the sky was not coming from where the sun was at the time, and the space between the trees was much darker than it had been before. We both could tell something was not quite right and was definitely off. I took off my helmet so I could hear better, and there was a sort of whistling/whooping sound coming from a very specific spot in the trees. Now, I couldn't see much of anything, but I knew something could see me, and I could feel that it was not happy that we were there. We turned around and noped the heck out of there as fast as we could. It was kind of like the scene from that movie in Princess Mononoke, where you see the forest spirit for the first time, except very angry. The cherry on top of all this is that we had been gone for about 30 minutes when we got back, but according to my girlfriend's family, we were gone for 3 hours. I know there's something strange in the woods, but I don't know what this was, and it's been burned in my brain for a decade. Found and Lost by Theo Plesha. I don't have a lot of time to get this all typed up and out there. I barely escaped, and they're looking for me. I hope this gets out. If you see it, make sure it goes viral so people know what's really happening. I was the foreman working on Thorn Grove, the new elementary school site. I'm going to try to explain this in a way that makes the most sense because it barely makes any sense to me. We were doing shift change and head counts as the graveyard crew left and the morning crew came on. Shane, the night shift supervisor, was having the same problem I was. Some folks weren't showing up when they were supposed to. My problem was less interesting since we got no calls, no shows all the time, but he was having a difficult time locating people on the site. He was blurry-eyed from the night, and I was frustrated because time was just getting wasted. Eventually, we got distracted by some commotion on the far end of the site. We started to trot over to where the yelling was coming from. Then Shane rushed up, his huge cargo pants, and started spilling excuses about trying to settle his daughter down and get her off to school after she lost her beloved stuffed animal. I told him we'd talk about it as my trot became a full-on dash as a cluster of 5 night shift guys were hauling over metallic containers, roughly the size of a 30-quart chest cooler. For all I knew, it was the freaking Ark of the Covenant. Shane and I called for an order while the workers tried to explain what they had found. They said they hit it with their backhoe bucket shuffle. I didn't believe them because the object, though dirty, looked completely intact, and the tines on the bucket would have certainly pierced the strongest metal cooler, unless of course it was solid titanium, which it couldn't be since only 2 men were able to haul it off well over 50 yards seemingly without issue. While I tried to settle them down, the backhoe operator tossed down 2 dirt-encrusted prongs of metal. I instantly recognized them as the metal tines of the backhoe bucket. This object now had my complete attention. They brushed away the dirt on all sides, and although it was silvery like metal, it had more of like a graphite dullness and shapelessness to it. The sides bore no signs of the impact from the shovel, and no markings of any other kind. Construction gloves wiped the top clear in sections. The top part read, Thorn Grove Elementary School Discovery Expansion 2052. One of the workers immediately gasped and said it was a time capsule not to be opened until 2052. Another worker pointed out that it was possibly for a new school they were building, and then Shane chimed in that it was probably an expansion that wasn't in the plans quite yet. One of the workers pointed out the lack of seam or any kind of latch to open this thing. He flipped over the impervious metallic crate. It seemingly moved with ease. He brushed off the bottom, which read, Thorn Grove Elementary School Discovery Expansion 2052. Do not open until 2102. One of the workers, who stood with his arms crossed over his chest and his wrap-around sunglasses reflecting the morning sun, shook his head, saying it had to be a prank. It would have been one hell of an expensive prank, though. It would have been made out of some sort of experimental graphene material to do what it did to the backhoe and remain intact. Either it was an elaborate prank or we're looking at a time capsule, but one from the future. Shane argued his men should open it, but as I already mentioned, the box was solid all the way around, with only markings on the top and bottom. That's when the worker who came in late, Peter Red, took out his phone and started to take pictures. As he circled the box and the other men crowded around, it must have triggered the auto flash on his phone's camera, and something about the flash triggered the box. The top of the box seemed to slither off in quarters onto the 4 corners, revealing a soap bubble-like membrane separating the contents from the open air. The best analogy I could make about the technology and how the capsule opened was that it was unsealed and globed away, like the liquid metal Terminator from Terminator 2. The cooler was filled with all kinds of strange objects. There was something that looked like a Rubik's Cube married to some sort of disc ball roughly 2 inches cubed. There was a collection of 4 cylinders made of material that seemed to be translucent. It's hard to really explain, you know? Each of these things were labeled H2O and ATMOS. I can only guess they were air and water samples from the future. There was a device that vaguely looked like headphones but looked narrower, like it might grip onto someone's neck. I could make out the snowflake symbol on the 2 pads, and I speculated that maybe it was some kind of personal air conditioner. There was a circular item that bore a passing resemblance to a pacifier, but the mouthpiece was hollow, with 2 short hoses that separated out into a lima bean-shaped pad that looked like a combination of an earbud or a foam ear protector. Thoughtlessly, one of the workers reached through the membrane and started to grab the various objects out. One by one, the unusual devices were grabbed or spilled out of the membrane onto the ground and mauled by the workers until the capsule was empty. Then Shane grabbed the box and seemed to lead a mass exodus off the property. We didn't even make it halfway through the parking lot. Some sort of armed forces in black and silver uniforms swamped us. They were clad in some sort of armor, motorcycle-like helmets and reflective visors and respirators. One of them had a red stripe on his chest, and I instantly recognized him as an officer because his head was twisting back and forth. I couldn't hear them communicating, and I assumed somehow they had sealed communication links between them. The officer's helmet, visor, and respiratory gear turned mostly transparent. His eyes were locked with mine, and he started to bark some sort of command. He told us to remain calm and still, that he was declaring a possible biohazardous incident and we couldn't leave until we were cleared. For men who fought their way into diners during COVID lockdowns and thought they won the lottery with tech from the future, this didn't sit well. They started shoving and darting away for a different way out. The officer shouted a command,
"Have it your way, Narcum attentum."
2 of his troopers raised and fired a grenade launcher into the air. The shell split into multiple ping-pong-sized ball spheres that popped like fireworks, dousing us with a white powder that knocked us out cold. All of the crew, Shane, Peter, the 5 others, and I woke up shivering and in pain in an orange tent with bright lights overhead and the sound of rushing air. The entrance of the tent was guarded by 2 heavily armed guards. We were separated from them by a thin inner section of the tent with a transparent airlock liner that reached most of the way around the tent. There were a series of cameras with a sort of reddish spotlight on them. They were periodically scanning over us and relaying medical information like heart rate and O2 levels to a series of monitors on the other side of the airlock. A voice came over a non-existent loudspeaker. It asked us to slowly regain our feet and to take the pills on the table in the middle of the tent if we were feeling anxious or achy. It explained that we were subjected to a fentanyl-based knockout agent similar to what the Russians used in the Moscow theater siege, and Narcan was used to revive us, but the whole experience could result in uncomfortable side effects which the pills could relieve. All of us started to shout to someone to tell us what was going on. The voice said the officer in command would be with us shortly. Indeed, the officer stood in the monitoring section of the tent with his face revealed to us. Something about the material the tent was made of revealed that the face he was displaying was of a false image, which made sense to me because this was some sort of ultra-secret operation. But the fact that no one was actually showing their faces made me feel better about my chances of surviving. In heist movies, you were dead if you showed your face, or whoever saw it was dead. There was no in-between. The officer explained that we had discovered an anti-chrono artifact, basically an object for reasons not explained to us that travels backwards in time. The nature of the artifact and its time period now breached by us had biological considerations. Future strains of the flu, future strains of COVID, future strains of the common cold, or even future novel viruses altogether we may not have even discovered. They were required by code to hold us until any pathogens could be identified and determined if they were infected. Under no circumstances could we leave until that process was complete, because the future of humanity was at stake, allegedly. He assured us that the tent was inescapable and he would not risk letting us go after our first reaction. He said the tent was constructed around us with virtually no contact between us and his men. They told us to stay put, and hopefully we'd make it out alive. We waited for hours. It was probably around noon when the officer came back and addressed me specifically, by name. He insisted he would speak to me. The officer told me something that I still don't fully understand. He said the time capsule was an anti-chrono artifact and was shielding regular chrono effects, essentially carrying them back in time, so long as they remained within the capsule. The capsule's exterior was set to .000001 standard units, which he relayed to me as it would, or in this case should, have only intersected with our perceivable present for 1 hour. He sighed when he said that none of this should have happened, and none of this would have happened if my men had dug in that area about 1 minute before, or about 60 minutes after shift change. The capsule would have been in our future by 60 minutes still, or our past by the smallest unit of time. Either way, it would not have been there at the time we were digging. He continued by saying that something had gone wrong because the time capsule had not disappeared from our present. He said it was stuck, and it was because the time capsule was missing something his men didn't manage to collect while we were on the ground and before the isolation tent went up. He reiterated that, as of now, we had some time. He believed the capsule was stable in our time for at least another hour, but after that he said that something bad was going to happen. He said something like Hitler could win World War II, I could never be born, or the Big Bang Theory might not happen at all. Everything could potentially disappear because something, in that case, needed to keep going back in time. He told me he believed I could figure out and talk to whoever was holding something and maybe get them to surrender it. In the meantime, the officer told me he was running temporal correlations to the incident facets and there was no guarantee they would produce results in the time allotted. He suggested I start asking people with connections to the area, specifically this field before it became the construction site for the school. The alternative was that he'd kill us all and risk contaminating himself to find the object. He said as far as the world, the public, and our families outside of the construction site were concerned, they were informed that there was a hazmat accident on site and that the area was off limits with unknown casualties. Yet he suggested I take any action I deemed necessary to keep it that way. As the officer left, I turned around to see my employees, my family, huddled on the other side of the tent. They lifted their heads and stared me down with suspicion. I respected them. I had been to some of their homes and even met most of their families. We played softball together and spent at least one solid 4th of July getting drunk together. I went to Peter's first child's funeral and was sort of close with his surviving daughter, Maggie. It occurred to me, though, that Peter was a newcomer to the area and had moved here for the project. My suspicions fell on Shane, who had lived here his whole life, but as I thought about it then, I wasn't sure how being local mattered. I gave everyone the cliff notes about what the officer had told me. I omitted certain details, chief among them was the alternative. I was met by loudness, mostly things I would have said. Who are these guys? Really? Who does something like this? How can you even travel back to the past? The experts say a lot of things, etc. I let them exhaust themselves a bit before I straight asked them if anyone kept something they shouldn't have from the box. I reiterated the disease aspect, that if they'd surrendered it now, we could all probably get out of here. I turned to Shane. He told me not to look at him. I told him I had reason to believe he had it. Whatever it was, he swore he only grabbed the capsule itself, and by the time he did, it was empty. It was then that one of the workers, Max, stepped up and yelled that if they wanted it so bad, they should come in and take it. He got applause from 2 others, including Peter. I told him this wasn't about that. That didn't stop Mac and Peter from taking swings at me. Shane and the other 3 then came and pushed them down and away. When the scuffle was said and done, there was a Beanie Baby-like toy on the floor. It was in the shape of a dachshund. I picked it up and Peter immediately came over to me and tried to look surprised. He said it was his daughter's stuffed animal that she lost, and he must have had it in his cargo pants the whole time. He tried to play it off like he found the toy she lost. I was about to hand it back to him when the stomach opened up and revealed a pouch. Beaming out of the pouch, in the eyes was a bright light and a message that read, "Dad, I finally found it. I wish every single day I made a bigger fit that morning. Love you, Dad, Maggie." I held it for a second and tried to play it off like I hadn't seen the message. Something clicked in my mind, though. Something like when you know you have something horribly gone wrong, like or if you have beat somebody in poker really bad but you don't want to show your excitement. I was about to ask Peter if he had been up here before, but I remembered when I brought him on, he said he used to bring his kids to the park nearby where the school was being built, and he was excited to move his family here and have a brand new school for them. Shortly afterwards, his son died. I realized that if I kept going back in time, there was a chance someone in the past might have encountered it and taken something like a stuffed dachshund with an eyeball hologram tech out of it, and maybe kept it. Why didn't it destroy the universe then? I wasn't so sure, but because of that, and I think that's entirely what happened, if it wasn't returned now, it would destroy the universe I was currently in because it would never make it back. It would still be here. I gripped the stuffed animal tightly and tossed it into the mini airlock and sealed it. The medical tech came by with a capsule and made the transfer and carried it out, presumably to be reburied and disappeared from our present and our future. I was bracing myself for Peter to come after me taking his daughter's toy, but instead, I saw Peter break down in tears as he slid down to the end of the tent, sobbing. Then it hit me. Dad, I finally found it. I wish I made a bigger fit that morning. Love, Maggie. In the future, Maggie would be affiliated in some way with the school's expansion product and the time capsule. The toy she recovered from the park as a younger child was finally made in the future, and she put that message into the capsule. But it was right on time. It couldn't have happened any other way. In under 2 hours, we were released from the quarantine monitoring tent, except Peter. Officially, the hazmat incident was us encountering a pocket of hydrogen sulfide gas while digging. All of us survived, except for Peter. We were compensated for the incident with the stipulation that we never discussed it. Doubts flooded my mind, along with tears. It all started to break down in my head. I was guilty, so I started telling Peter's story, and now they're after me. I hope, if nothing else, people know the story of Peter. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true, unexplained paranormal horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. The more likes this episode gets, the more YouTube promotes it, and that helps the swamp grow its ever-expanding waters. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications as I upload brand new videos on all things natural and supernatural multiple times a week. If you're on the go, but don't have YouTube Premium, but still want to download and listen to your favorite swamp dweller scary stories no matter where you are, you can download them absolutely free from Spotify, Apple Podcast, and pretty much everywhere else you find your favorite podcast online. If you made it all the way to the end, I would love to know what story was your favorite tonight. It helps me pick out better stories in the future, and I love seeing your feedback and reviews. Thank you guys so much for supporting the swamp the way you do. I couldn't do this on a daily basis without you all. Be sure to join me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all those other random websites that we're on, and I'll see you all soon with another creepy episode.